Well, let me take a time out and say a special good morning to one and all, especially our listeners via Classic Radio 105.5 or 105.9. Good Friday morning. It's the 14th of July. Let me say good morning also to my viewers, those of you via GBN TV, whether channel 7, 11 or channels 20. Good morning. What about our social media viewers and listeners out there in the world, especially those of you via our Facebook page? Always loads of you there. Good morning to you. Our YouTube channel viewers, listeners via GBN's webpage. Good morning and welcome to another edition of To The Point. I'm your host, GT, and I'll be around with you for the next hour. We had a pretty interesting show lined up for you this morning, and let me just get my details together. Yes, let me say good morning to my guest this morning. It's Dr. Augustine Panchoo, and I want to say go over to Dr. Panchoo and say good morning to you, sir. Sir, good morning, and how are you?
I am doing really great. Good morning, JT, and how are you doing yourself?
I am doing all right. Besides the circumstances, in terms of our conversation this morning, I would say I'm doing okay.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay.
Dr. Panchoo, you are a clinical psychologist, and the reason for our conversation this morning, it's bearing on the recent happenings that is been taking place on Ireland, and it's a bit of a concern to lots of us, as locals living here. Sometimes we may say it's not our first time for these incidents here in Grenada, but the magnitude of it, I would say, may bring about some concerns. And one of our main reasons for our conversation this morning, we want to talk about, the signs that bear out, in terms of the depression and so forth that a lot of folks go through. And sometimes it's not always obvious for the untrained individual to spot them, if I could say it like that. So our conversation this morning is going to go around in that direction. We will invite our listeners and viewers out there also, if they do have some concerns, they could probably chime in. We certainly will allow you the opportunity to, when you can do so. So let's start the conversation this morning, Dr. Panchoo, by starting off. What are those signs that in the family members, friends, etc., could look out for in terms of knowing that someone is going through some sort of depression?
Well, that's a very good question, JT. And for our listeners, I think maybe that question should be probably, let's address that question a little later on. Let's set the tone. I think it's pertinent for us to set the tone with what we are seeing in Grenada.
Yes.
Over the last maybe 6 or 7 years, since 2015, Grenada has recorded an increase in suicides or alleged suicides. And 2015, about 5 or 6 people. By 2016, we had about between 6 and 7, and the numbers keep rising. A couple of years in between 2017 and this year, the numbers did go down a little, but again, we started to see suicide trending, and I think what has caused us to be of great concern this time is the fact that within days of each other we lost two vibrant people to alleged suicide. So this is the concern. I think the concern, we have to bear in mind that there is also a corresponding increase in violent crimes, in violence perpetrated against each other. And suicide is very often termed as violence against self. I want to say this here. There are three terms that we probably need to remember as we deal with the topic of suicide, and then we are going to branch off into other mental health issues like clinical depression and anxiety, etc. There are some people who think about suicide. We call that suicide ideation. That is, these are the people who who sometimes look at their life situations, whatever it is, and they say to themselves, maybe it was better that I was not born, I was not here, and very often these people, they do not really act on hurting self. It's just the thought that keeps coming up always and churning in their mind about their inadequacy, and maybe
if I could chime in here on you, Dr. Panchoo, how worrisome is that per se in terms of folks going through that always having that thought in mind, I want to do something to myself? How worrying is that?
That is worrisome, JT. Sometimes it's not a malignant happening. It is more. Sometimes we say it is. It's harmless. But let me say this to you: we know, social scientists. We know that what the thoughts can do. The thoughts will influence our behaviors at certain times. So if you keep churning a negative perspective about life, the tendency for you to want to hurt self has now increased. It does not mean that you will, because you are thinking, oh, I'm inadequate. Maybe you are diagnosed with a terminal illness and you can't see a way out. Maybe your spouse has died. Maybe someone, loved one in your family has left you. Maybe a divorce. Maybe you lost your job. Maybe you have lost your home, your income, and so you are in a state of desperation and despair, and you're starting to think, maybe the best way out for me would be better if I was not here. So you're churning that idea and you're thinking about it. You may not necessarily act on it, and so it leads us to the second term that I want us to focus on, and that is suicide attempt. Suicide attempt is the act of trying to hurt self, but not succeeding. Okay, and very often people try to hurt themselves through an overdose of maybe pill. Maybe the dosage was not strong enough to put them to forever sleep. Maybe they try slashing their wrist, but the cut was not deep enough to cause a lot of bleeding, or sufficient bleeding didn't happen. Maybe they were rescued by someone, and so that is what we refer to as an attempt. And then the third phrase that we probably need to focus on is that of just suicide, and that is actually succeeding at taking one's own life. JT, you asked the question, well, what are some of the predisposing factors that will lead people to hurt themselves? So that's where we are going to take the conversation now. The thing about it is that, JT, the unfortunate, or maybe the sad thing about suicide is that we never really know what it is that brought a person to the point of taking his or her life. Now, we may assume, because remember, in the act of suicide, the person is no longer with us, so they are not able to articulate their true feeling, their authentic self, emotional stuff that was going on just at the time of suicide. So what do? As scientists, we go back now and start looking at the life, the behaviors, the talk, the content of conversation, their life story, so that we can piece together certain things that will help us to determine what might be the cause of someone taking his or her life, or, as we say, what are some of the predisposing factors that will lead someone to take their life. And let me talk about a couple. One, someone who has had an attempt at taking his or her life already and did not succeed. Okay? If someone has had an episode of attempted suicide, there is a strong likelihood that that person will one day succeed. Let me quickly add here, JT, and for our listeners, Interventions are really great, and it can prevent people from committing suicide, because I believe, those of us who are clinicians, we believe that suicide, by and large, is preventable. However, if someone really made up or has made up their mind, his or her mind, about hurting himself or herself or taking their life, they will find a way to do it. I just want to put this out there. Generally speaking, if somebody is determined enough to take his or her life, they will do it. So the very first factor that predisposes someone to commit suicide or to hurt themselves is, you ask, are there previous attempts at that? And if we know, if we're living with a family member or we know of a friend who has attempted to hurt themselves through suicide before, that is certainly a red flag, and this is something that we need to guard. That person we need to guard always, and look for, check on, make sure that he or she is in a state of logical thinking all the time. Secondly, JT, as another predisposing factor, is that of mental illness. Now, if someone is living with a mental illness, whether it is clinical depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, if someone is living with a mental illness, that also puts them in a place where they are more predisposed to hurting self. Because when you live with a mental illness, your thinking, your mindset is sometimes compromised. It's sometimes challenged by the mental illness, and therefore you are not thinking sometimes very logical. Sometimes you're not thinking coherently, and that can lead you to a feeling of wanting to hurt yourself or actually hurting yourself. A third one, JT, that we must look at is that of a family history. If there is a family history of mental health challenges and or suicide, committing suicide in the family, that predisposes someone it gives them a greater chance, or it tells that this person that may be struggling with life issues has a family history, and that person should be taking note of someone with a family history of suicide. And then there is the fourth one that I want to talk a little about, and that is struggles with life stressors. Life stressors could be economic situations. Someone who has lost his income because that person has an illness, or maybe that person has a mental illness or a physical illness, and they have lost their sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. So if they are struggling with life stressors, maybe you wanna, you may want a family, but you're not yet married and you're getting in age, and you think, well, nobody wants you. Your self-esteem is deflated. And maybe you're trying to have a baby and you just can't. Multiple occasions you're trying, you're hoping, and it is not happening. It increases your stress. You experience a divorce. You lose a loved one. These are triggers in social life settings that can increase a person's chances or predisposes someone for in committing suicide. Let me also add here a fifth one, and that is of illness, terminal illness. I want to take it a notch, because I don't know, JT, if you were around or if you remember, but I certainly was around here in 2021, I think either 20 or 21, and that's recent enough. There was a 74-year-old male patient at our general hospital who jumped to his death. And when his case was investigated, it was found out that he was diagnosed with a terminal illness. The terminal illness is inconsequential because of privacy issues. But what I'm saying here is that he was to the point where the news of the terminal illness brought him in a space that he felt that his only option was to take his life. And then there is a sixth one, and that I want to talk about, and that is sudden.
Dr. Panchoo, I would like you to take a pause for a minute. We due for a break. Let's take it. There's so much that we could talk about this morning in this program. I know you get the opportunity here to, of course, explain it all. But let's take a short break, and when we come back, we continue. We'll be back shortly. Hey, folks, it's to the point here on Classic Radio and GBN TV. We take a break. We come back. We speak into Dr. Augustine Panchoo. We coming right back. Stay with us.
Have you?
At the NIS, our team proudly works to support the evolving needs of Grenadians. We have made some changes to our operations and want to keep you informed. Firstly, we are happy to introduce the new unemployment benefit. This benefit will provide an insured person with 50% of his or her former income in the case of sudden unemployment. To support this benefit and other benefits we offer, it was necessary to increase the contribution rate. The contribution rate will increase gradually each year until it reaches 16% in 2031. As always, the contribution will be split between you and your employer. The pensionable age will also increase from 60 to 65 years. This increase will also be gradually reaching age 65 in 2029. Pensioners will continue to be eligible for a pension from age 60, but will receive a reduced payment. The NIS recognizes that the prices of basic customer goods are increasing globally. Therefore, we are happy to also increase the weekly minimum pension payment by 25%. Finally, we have adjusted our survivor's benefit payment to a percentage of the age pension minimum. Widows, widowers, and dependent parents will receive 100% or $58 weekly, while children will receive 50% or $29 weekly of the deceased's pension. We are here to make the transition to these new changes as clear and simple as possible. If you have any questions on how these changes impact you and your family, please contact our new informational hotline at 440-6647 or visit www.nisgrenada.org. Thank you for allowing us to be your social security provider.
Well, what do you know? The NLA is giving you an additional chance at winning in its Crazy Cash Second Chance Parish Giveaway. Yes! Starting June 10th, enter your non-winning Daily Cash 4, Daily Pick 3, or Playway tickets valued at $12 or more in a single purchase for a chance to win over $25,000 in cash. Be sure to write your name, address, and contact info on your entries before dropping them in the NLA branded box at your favorite authorized agent. Draws will be conducted every Friday starting June 23rd to July 21st, 2023 for every parish. That's a total of 105 draws of $250 each. Promotion ends July 14th, 2023. Must be 18 or older to participate. Other terms and conditions apply. NLA, making your dreams come true.
Welcome back, listeners and viewers. It's to the point for today, Friday, the 14th of July. With me this morning and my guest, Dr. Augustine Panchoo. Let's go back over to Dr. Panchoo and say Dr. Panchoo, good morning, and welcome back on To the Point this morning. As we continue our discussion, you of course, for giving a lot of information a while ago in terms of the various signs of depression and so forth. And one question I would like to ask before we continue. What are some of the corrective approach one can take in terms of when these signs are so forth from a medical point of view? What are some of the corrective approaches one can take?
Well, let me say this here. I was talking about the predisposing factors. So let me just mention this last one. I'll make a statement and answer that question. One of the predisposing factors is sudden or recent loss. Sometimes it takes people a little while to grieve for loss, especially if if the loss relates to someone in the family who died, or maybe a divorce. So these are the two most critical high-powered loss that stresses that results from loss that a person could experience. And so if you have not navigated, if you have not sought help, maybe you have not dealt with the loss, it can prolong a little. So one of the predisposing factors of someone, you have to ask or look at that person and try to figure, has that person grieved? Have they successfully, or I don't know if there is anything about successfully grieving, but has that person actually grieved to the point where they have accepted that loss? And if it is not that case, then the loss is prolonged, and that person could get to the point of thinking life is really unfair. There are two terms that I want to introduce before we talk about how do we help people that are in crisis. Very often there are two qualifying conditions for people who hurt themselves or who take their lives. And that is one, a feeling of helplessness and a feeling of hopelessness. So when helplessness sets in, it tells you that that person has come to the realization that they cannot see anyone around them providing the answer that they seek for the crisis, whether it's mental health, whether it's the grieving, whether it's a terminal illness, loss of job, etc., and the list can go on. That person feels helpless because they think that nobody else can understand their situation or help them. And the other one is hopelessness. That is when they think that there is nothing within them that they can do except to hurt themselves. So they cannot figure out a solution. All the plans that they have, all the skills that they have tried, all the therapy that they have gone through, nothing can give them the strength or the resiliency skills to navigate this. And so they feel what is we feel hopeless. And so when hopelessness and helplessness have set in, we create the right condition for committing suicide becomes present. And so this is where professionals like myself, and Grenada is blessed with a plethora of well-qualified people, whether they're counselors in the schools or counselors in the Ministry of Social Development or the Ministry of Education that also has so many of them. There are many local churches that provide counseling. So Grenada is blessed to have a wide range of different qualified people who can provide services, and what it is that we look for, and or how do we reach out? We reach out. It is very difficult, JT, for the untrained eye to sort of decipher whether or not a person is suicidal. Take for instance the story of Robin Williams. Robin Williams, the great American actor, comedian. People love him, whether he appeared in Mrs. Doubtfire or Dr. Patch. Whatever movie Robin Williams played a part in, it became an instant success. He made the world laugh. Nobody outside of his immediate family and his close circle could figure out that Robin Williams, the great actor, was battling clinical depressions because he made us laugh. He looked well, whether it was on the red carpet or on the big screen, and nobody could figure that out. But in his house, when he went back home after these great shows, when he went back home, his family said he was a recluse. He stayed in his room most of the time. Most of the time he did not feel like doing his personal hygiene, like taking showers, talking to people, coming out, going to restaurants, etc. When he got home, he was a recluse, and that was a sign that told everyone around him, including his family, that he was in trouble and that he was a prime candidate for hurting himself. So as clinicians, what do? We ask those very hard questions. We ask the questions like, has the person been isolated? So if a person who used to love life, we now see that that person is favoring to be isolated. They give up the phone. They don't want to talk to friends. When they get home, they do not want to, interact with family and do family activities, and they stay in the room. That's a telltale sign. So we ask those questions because we want to know. Another thing is the person sleeping too much or too little? That's the thing about mental health issues, depression, etc. If a person is sleeping too much, we may have to ask the question about the state of mind, or if the person is thriving on far too less hours of sleep. We have to start asking those very critical questions. So as a professional, there are other things that we do. For example, we start asking, is the person giving away prized possession? If somebody owns, some good stuff, whether it is good clothing, the purse, the belt, personal belonging, the computer, if you see someone who has prized possessions and they start giving it away for no obvious reasons, we ask the question, we want to know, why are they doing that? Because these are telltale signs of someone who is thinking and or planning to hurt himself or herself. We also ask, how is the person's hygiene? Are they careful? Or have they become careless about their own personal hygiene? Now let me say this here. Sometimes it is very difficult to figure out if someone is going to hurt themselves. So let me now say that there is a myth that says that when someone commits suicide, that they're mentally ill, and that is far from the truth. Someone could hurt himself or herself, but that person is not battling a mental illness necessarily. Because someone could have a break, what we call a psychotic break. Maybe an event just triggered that person to the point where they start feeling helpless, hopeless, and not giving it enough time to find solutions. They come to the realization that that's their reality. Now we know what we say about perception. If someone perceives, whatever someone perceives, that becomes his or her reality. And so if a person perceives that nobody cares, I can't do this by myself and nobody else can help me get to where I want to go, that becomes the reality of that person. So mental health professionals, it is sometimes very difficult with an untrained eye to see signs. Sometimes the signs are glaring, but they are not easily seen because these signs can be very, very, very tricky, to point out or to decipher.
Dr. Panchoo, let me come in here and you once again and ask this. You spoke of the various signs that may portray from individuals who go into depression or some kind of a mental breakdown, if we could put it in that way. Now, if those signs are that noticeable, where does family, and I still come back to that initial question, where does family, friends and stuff come in? What can they really do to I know you also mentioned that sometimes there's nothing you can do if an individual actually makes their mind up and that's what they're going to do, that's what they're doing. But what can we really do to get that individual to be thinking differently now in terms of that problem that they're going through?
Right. Very good question. Let me send a caution right now to our listeners. And JT, we have to be very cautious with the kind of words that we use to people who are struggling. Well, not just struggling, huh? If we make it a habit to just be kind in our words and be selective in the way we speak to people and we approach people, that will help us so that we will not be having to discriminate and wonder, is that appropriate language to say to this person or that person based upon how they're feeling? It doesn't matter what. But people can be cruel with the way that they say things. Now, in 2021, we had 2 suicides in St. Patrick's, close neighbors, both of them. One hung himself and the other one ingested some widicide, okay? Very close to each other. One was attributed to substance use disorder, and the other one was attributed to being teased by his peers because his girlfriend was cheating on him. Okay? And that's why I say sometimes we have to be very cautious with the way we speak to people. He was being taunted and he was being teased that he was not man enough. His self-esteem, I think, was destroyed because he couldn't keep a girl. And he took on the responsibility for the demise of the relationship. And that led him to a point where he hung himself, a couple of inches off the ground. Right there in his house. So we have to be very cautious of what we say, how we say it. Therefore, I say to people and family members, when we see those glaring signs, engage the person and ask the good question. Do not just ask, are you okay? But say to the person, I see these things. Would you like to talk to a professional? Or I see these signs, and I want to encourage you to talk to a professional. Here is a number. You can call this ministry. You can call this person. You can call that number, and they will guide you because I sense that you're struggling with something. JT, one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that sometimes we see these signs and we tell ourselves, well, he is just going through this. She is just going through this. She is going to be all right. We have a tendency to say and to think that people or individuals are going to be all right when really and truly these people are not all right, and they are not going to be all right unless there is some very specific intervention that saves them from hurting themselves.
Dr. Panchoo, I also want to ask you another question in terms, you did mention that in your previous statements that you were making. In individuals who may have attempted suicide and it may have failed for whatever reason, as you mentioned, whatever they decided to use didn't work. Now, that individual re-entering to society in some way or the other, what kind of help could be thrown out to that individual?
Yes, let me say this here. I think we have to be really cautious as a nation and as providers of mental health treatment. When someone attempts suicide and they did not succeed, we say, based upon the research that is public knowledge, that that person has a greater chance of doing it, trying it again, and maybe succeeding next time. What we sometimes do not see is the care to sort of prevent that person from trying it again. Okay? And so what we need is a plan to keep people who have attempted suicide. And Grenada knows, I mean, the Ministry of Health knows, because sometimes, most of the times, these people are hospitalized for a period. So, you know, there are social workers, there are administrators, there are people who follow, caseworkers, who follow these people. So I'm saying what would become necessary is for us to have a follow-up plan to follow these people and provide the necessary services, because very often after they maybe flushed, their body is flushed out of the ingested material, or their wrist is healed, we just send them home without any follow-up therapeutic or counseling taking place. And so there is need for that, JT, and there is need for the family also to become engaged and involved in protecting your family members. And if it is our friend, it is becoming of us also. It behooves us to be able to protect the life of our friend. And so sometimes we take it for granted. And until we see something drastic happening as a successful suicide, and then the nation becomes very uneasy, and we mourn and we lost. And it's, as I said before, it is when someone really wants to commit suicide, chances are, more often than not, they will succeed, because they will find ways to do it, because that's what they're thinking. That's what they're thinking. Yeah.
All right. Dr. Panchoo, we drew for a break again. Let's take it. We come back, we discuss about. Stay with us here, folks. It's To The Point for today, Friday. Stay with us, folks. We come in right back.
Spice Up returns to the Esplanade Mall courtyard. Spice Up the Esplanade. Every Wednesday and Friday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Spice Up the Esplanade. Your all-in-one Spice Mass event. Get a taste of everything Carnival. From music to mass to food to fashion. All things Carnival in one place. Esplanade Mall, July 7th to August 11th. Don't you miss it.
Welcome to the SMC's Crescendo to Grenada's Panorama 2023. And you see Pan Business, that is we business.
My name is Andrea Isdale. I am 21 years old and I am from St. Paul's. For me, playing Pan was like second nature, because like any other community-based organization, when you grow up seeing your parents do something, it's natural for you to want to do it. So it wasn't a choice, it wasn't a decision. It was just a natural thing that I knew that I actually had to do. So it was no choice. At the Panyard, we have on Thursdays is our in-house Panyard Liming Day. So we have different things. So tonight is our cricket night. We have games night. We try to bring in persons to speak, to have motivational nights, to get players more inspired and wanting to play the pan more, and to have a greater love for the pan. So that's some of the things that we do. It's definitely okay to come and see us practice. We always put on a show, whether it's practice or performance or a gig. Our days for practice are Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m.
welcome back, listeners and viewers. It's to the point for today, Friday the 14th of July. With me this morning, we have Dr. Augustine Panchoo, who's a clinical psychologist, and we'll be talking this morning, about depression and so forth. And of course, he's offering lots of information this morning that you as individuals out there who are listening and viewing can probably, absorb or look out for individuals who may be suffering from some form of depression and contemplating suicide of the sort. Dr. Panchoo, welcome back once again.
Thank you, JT.
A question I would like to ask, how can we get professional help, let's say 24/7, for depressed people? Is that even possible?
Well, I think it is possible. Let me say this. Right now, you can call the general hospital, but you'll have to go through the emergency. There is a triage at the general hospital for people who are suffering from mental health challenges. So if you were to call or to bring persons at the general hospital, regardless of what time, they will be triaged, and then if the services that they need is warranted by a visit to the Mungay facility, which is our lone psychiatric facility, then they will be transferred there. However, there is such a bold stigma in our society about visiting Mungay that people would rather try to deal with it at home. I know parents who would rather just try to deal with it within the confines of the family rather than go or send a child or parent to Mungay facility. Outside of that, there is no organization that is set up in our Grenadian context to provide a crisis hotline or a hotline that will take care of psychological or emotional distress 24 hours. But DT, I like the question because I believe that this is a kind of service that is needed in our Grenadian context. Every society, civilized society, does need one where you can access. I mean, someone may be struggling with their mental health, and they wake up in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning, and they want someone to talk to, or they want to reach out to a facility or a trained professional, and we do not really have that, except of course some individuals who provide individual services, but you may not necessarily know of their number or how to reach them. So that's why it is probably very important for us at a national level through the ministry. I always advocate for that. I believe just as the Ministry of Health has a national plan for physical ailment. Anytime you get injured in the nighttime, you can drive to a clinic set up or maybe to a hospital in your area and get treated. I believe that maybe now is an opportune time for the Ministry of Health to create that arm of health services. We always say, JT, that there is no health without mental health. There is no health without mental health. It therefore means that just as we seek to provide for the physical health of our nation, we should equally do so for providing for the emotional and psychological health of our people. Yeah.
Let me also ask you this. This one goes to you directly in a way. How concerned are you in terms of the trend that we've seen lately over the last couple of years in terms of the suicide attempts and even individual, committing suicides? How concerned are you about that?
I am very concerned, JT. There is no question. The loss of one life is way too many for any cultured society. The loss through suicide we are talking, or violent crimes as a matter of fact, or crimes related to mental health or mental illness. The loss of one life is really way too many. I mean, we have had so many violent crimes for this year so far, and suicide is also a violent crime, and it's a violent crime against self. But I am concerned. I'm concerned with the trend, with the trending. And there is something I want to quickly share with you this morning and our listeners. And there is something out there in the field of sociology called the copycat syndrome. The copycat syndrome. And that is where people look at something and they feel in some ways empowered by what they see, and they figure, maybe I could do it too. I mean, I am not saying that it was a copycat syndrome that resulted in the second suicide within days of each other, but let's look critically at the very first alleged suicide. The very first alleged suicide is somebody who is a reputable person in society, is a young person, is well educated, has a lot of family links, is career oriented, has a lot of friends, is pretty, or you know, and so in many ways, somebody looking at her and saying to themselves or himself or herself, but if this person is struggling with something that leads them to take their own life, well, how about me? You know, and God forbid that this is what happened in the second suicide, that the person gauged the decision that on the decision of the other young lady that happened a couple of days ago. So we have to be very, very cautious. And you ask the question, how concerning it is to me as a professional, and I say it is very concerning. And maybe it is time for us to look at, you know, ask the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Social Development, and other government agencies or people who are involved intimately in the government with caring for people, with you know, we have some people in our current government who have extensive training as counselors and mental health professionals, and they probably need to come and to make a statement to the public, a statement that will seek to sort of allay the fears and the concerns of our people. Maybe that voice could be a voice of reason and a voice of care and a voice of concern for the way things are right now.
All right. Panchoo, our final 10 minutes on the show this morning. And this section, I would invite our listeners and viewers who may have a question or two for you relating to our subject matter this morning. Let's go to the phone line and speak to our first caller. Caller, good morning and welcome.
Hi, good morning to you and your followers and to Dr. Panchoo. I'm relieved, Dr. Panchoo, because for the last 20 minutes I was trying to call you to speak about the copycat syndrome. And but you raised it in the end. Hats off to you, because we have to be so careful and how we treat with things like this in the media, especially. Because sometimes we try to make it almost, if it's possible to say that, glamorize it. And I think there must be some sort of policy, you know, of how you deal with things like suicide, especially when it's done by young people. We try, you know, this young lady's pictures are everywhere in social media yesterday. And I happen to know her. I see her passing my way. I know her family very well. It hurts them. And it also emboldens other young people. So I think we have to mature to some extent where we deal with these things in a, let's say, a proper way. What suggestion do you have in terms of dealing with those things, how you form the narrative and how you protect the rest of the society when something like that happens? Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you for your contribution as always.
Yeah, thank you. As a social scientist himself, I know he understands the trajectory, and you're right. I mean, when you look at the two young ladies who allegedly committed suicide, I mean, you know, these are nice people. These are people who have the rest of their lives ahead of them, and there might be some people here, some person might be saying, you know what, I am struggling so much I cannot see my way out, and if these these people, normal-looking people, people with future, can do that to themselves, maybe I can use this as a momentum to also get out of this misery that I feel here. Right. Get out of this misery.
We do have another caller that's entertained. Caller, good morning. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Panchoo, and morning, GT. I normally say morning to GT first, but morning, Dr. Panchoo.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah.
As someone who have lived with depression, notwithstanding the fact that there are people who have told me not to talk about it, I could appreciate and emphasize with people who go through difficulties. And it's not because I've been punished by some force or not. There are certain things in the human being, when it says imbalance, and also based on your history in terms of how you came in the world, what experience you had, and so on, what that could affect a person. And I just want to say, the first time I said in public that people were asking where, in the early days of Talk Shop, I used to be present, and then some people were inquiring, where am I? And I responded, I said, I'm there, but I'm just not in that state to contribute. And a cousin of mine who was abroad, who heard me, called me and said, no, Joseph, no, don't mention that, don't talk about that. But probably if I didn't talk about that, I might have been on the other side by now. It's interesting that I think Dr. Panchoo talked about the people who died being nice people and that kind of thing. There's a tendency to think that this thing could only happen to one type of people. This affects everybody. Even in scripture, there are certain outstanding people, personalities, who are afflicted with depression. And they use language which is not able to interpret. But so we need to find a way. And for a long time, I've been saying that the way we've been doing life here is not helping us. We have promoted selfishness, individualism for the last 3 decades. And once people have their little corner, whether it's the house, the land, the man, people think that is all. But we've been losing connection with each other. One psychologist on the news last night talked about we need to live in communities. And this is what I've been talking about. And also to be communal, to be in contact, to be connected. We're not at the moment. We are disconnected. And there are people who are quick to blame one department of life for that, but not the whole of life. Look at how we are divided in terms of denomination, over 300 and something. There's so many things the individual has to deal with, and then all the media coming at them. But so much, it's overwhelming. Notwithstanding the fact that the World Health Organization years ago had predicted in a paper or so, in a study or report, that depression would be the leading cause of death in the early part of the century. And also, you have a state in the United States, Connecticut, who a few years ago, the leading cause of death of young people between, I think, 15 or 16 to 24 was suicide. In a big, wealthy, so-called wealthy country like that. So you have the situation which we are not really paying attention to us, and I'll end it. After Duncan died, because we shared each other's experience, I tried to organize something in a kind of support group. And people say, but nobody really wants to do the work, because to do it, you have to put in some effort. And that's the problem not facing us. But more than anything, I think if we really learn to know each other, we don't even listen to one another. That's a problem. It sickens me. Nobody listens to each other. Anyway, I won't go further. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution this morning.
Thank you very much.
We do have another caller. Let's entertain it.
Okay, let's take
this caller before we come to our wrapping up segment. Caller, good morning and welcome.
Yes, GT, good morning.
Good morning to you.
I listened very attentively to Dr. Panchoo. And previous times when he spoke, I got the indication from callers that he is a believer in Christ. He's an Adventist, I think they say. What I would like to ask him is, can God play a role in any of these situations that we're talking about? And has he ever promote godliness, that knowing God, having a relationship with God could prevent a lot of those things that people go through, or give them the strength and the tenacity to overcome them because God is in their lives. I would like him to respond to this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution. Would you care to respond?
Well, I heard the question, JT, loud and clear, and I believe so. I believe one of the coping skills that people can use effectively for helping them navigate the life of mental illness or when they get to the point of wanting to hurt themselves is a belief in the higher power, in some entity, a power. And for us, we believe it is Jesus or we believe it is God, but there are other people who believe in other little things or great things that can help them. But I agree with the caller. The question is very pertinent. To believe that there is a higher power greater than us that can strengthen us and keep us safe is to acquiesce, is to give up the vulnerability that we have emotionally and psychologically to say, yes, I can't do it by myself, but I know of someone trusted in the power of God to be able to do it for me. Remember, JT, we established that two of the great criteria for people hurting themselves is feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. And when people come to that realization that there is someone that is bigger and greater, the creator of the world, then that could add some essence and save a life or save lives. So caller, you're right on target. The research, in fact, that's not just me talking, When you study religion and mental health, you will understand that there is a great symbiotic relationship between a person's belief in God and faith in God and their emotional well-being. Yes.
Dr. Panchoo, we're coming to the end of today's program. Any closing comments you would like to throw?
Yes,
of course,
JT,
our word of advice before we do, Phil?
Yes, let me use 60 seconds of the 2 minutes we have to talk about. Many people, JT, believe that when someone commits suicide, that person is weak and that person is disorganized, or maybe that person is not godly. And JT, this is something further from the truth. Let me say this to you. Remember I said that two of the things that bring a person to the realization that he or she can't do it. JT, the last thing that a person will hold on to is the control of how he or she goes in this life. When a person comes to the conclusion that I'm hopeless and I'm helpless, they say to themselves, you know what? The last thing that I want to do is to control how I die. And you ask me the question, JT, am I concerned? Yes, I'm concerned. When people come to the realization, I'm hopeless, I'm helpless, life is battering me, but the last thing I want to do is to give myself the power to choose whether I want to hang myself, whether I want to cut my wrist, whether I want to jump from a building. That's the finality and control that a person who is committing suicide takes. And it's a scary feeling, JT. We ending by that today. So let me say to all of our friends who are looking, if you see any of your friends or family members and you think or just think that he or she might do well with a professional or someone to talk to, please reach out to a professional. Reach out to GBN. GBN has the numbers of a lot of people who can really help you navigate life stresses. Thank you so much, JT, for having me. Thank you, listeners and callers.
Dr. Panchoo, I want to thank you also for sharing, of course, your knowledge with us this morning is definitely well received, and certainly hope we could do this again. Have yourself a great day, sir.
All right. Thank you, JT.
All right. Hey, folks, that's how we take a wrap for today's program to the point, the final one for the week. And thanks to all who contributed for the past week in terms of the information shared. And whether you call, you probably messaged. I want to thank you so much. Have yourself a great day and a great weekend to come. Until we meet again, have yourself a good one. Goodbye for today.